There is just no way to safely remove this extremely horrifying, menacing piece of equipment here. Trollo, I can't keep having this conversation with you. You really need to invest in actual armor. So I've said it once, I've said it 100 times. Armor is for women and little girls. Far be it from me to agree with anything that giant nerd has to say about anything, but armor, like, it helps. Filthy traitor. just to make sure we are on the exact same page, you are telling me that if I had this Type 14 gnarly looking broadhead, you would be happy to tank that without any armor at all? Meh. I could take it. I hate that I'm saying this with every fiber of my being, but I think it's time to do an archery video with some demonstrations about arrowheads and how it works against armor and unarmored. Aw, look at you. You do care. Don't push it. I am still very angry at you. You made me shave my midlife 40s dad goatee. No. I did you a favor. That thing was hideous. No, it was a display of power. All the other dads would have seen it. And I mean, they would have known what's up. It's true. You look like a woman now. Do me a quick favor and just feel your face. What do you mean? What have you done? Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerd and nerdettes. The purpose of today's video is quite simple. Which arrow would be the worst to get shot with? The idea for this video came about when I was doing the most recent testing with the rock or the flint arrowheads, and they kept blowing up and breaking when I would hit ribs and things, but they would shatter and embed in the bone. And I never really have done the varying arrow types against like a meat type target. So this video I'm going to be exploring a couple different arrowheads that were used in the medieval times, early to late, how that would affect the body, how much armor would protect against certain things, how much damage you might take upon extracting that arrow. So last video, our tips were these rock tips here, and they would break off and embed in the body, and early humans, it's thought that they were long distance or endurance type hunters, so if you cause that or it's stuck in the body, you just track it over time, you're going to be okay. Once steel was introduced, later iterations of arrowheads were able to be custom tailored to a specific purpose and armor type, and that's reflective in their designs. So to start, we have a needle tip bodkin here. This was going to be very prevalent when chainmail was in the field frequently. This was used best against mail because it had that long taper point and was able to push through that mail very, very well. Later on, as armor types got better, you got these four-headed pure metal type bodkins, and the idea behind it is the same as a pilum, as opposed to a rounded one like with the bodkins. This would punch through, and some of them, and when plate became more prevalent in later periods of time, it was a shortered triangular point here and then it tapered down dramatically, much like a pilum, because it's easier to punch through steel for a short amount and have the rest of it glide through than to have the whole thing stretched out and punch through all that steel. You're gonna be losing energy as you're dragging through there. So if you're able to punch through that first point, the rest of it's gonna go through very easily. But as a whole, when you break it down simply, most arrows were categorized into two different categories. You had the barbed arrows and the non-barbed arrows. So we're gonna be taking the best of each of these and testing against the target from varying differences, adding armor, and also seeing how you can extract the arrows without causing more damage to the individual. So what we have here is our meat target. We got some flank steak, and behind that I have some beef ribs. Now obviously these are thicker than human ribs, probably analogous to a horse, which is what the cutting arrows were often used for, the barbed arrows to cause the horse to panic as they ran and kind of disrupt the cavalry charge. But we're gonna be starting with this here. I'm gonna use a 130-pound bow. I'm gonna start with bodkin tips to see how it looks, and this is gonna be close away, far up, and then from there we'll move on to the different ones and see how I can try to extract those as well. All right. So the first shot was right here, and that one hit bone, definitely. So it hit center bone, and that slowed it down, but you can see, I'll bring it around, and you can all the way out the back. The second one here did not hit bone. That hit a gapping in between the ribs. And so that went all the way to the very end of it. Now, the thing about these is the extraction. The thing about bodkins is they're relatively easy to take out once they're insured inside of you, and did a fair amount of damage, 100%. However, it's not going to cause the same problems as the barbed arrows when pulling out, I would surmise. So I'm just going to try and go ahead and see if this one can pop out. Yep, oh gross. So yeah, no problems there. Obviously it punched in. Well, this one here through the bone, I mean, it's crunchier, but you can see, again, once it's in and through, that's gonna be the extent of the damage. It's really meant through penetrating through plate. It's a poker, not a cutter. Next up, we have these really nasty looking Type 14 curved broadheads here. These are both gonna be close slow motion. I'm not gonna show the distance shot for these because I don't know how they're gonna react. If it hits bone, I think they might bend or break. I wanna be sure if I get those shots that they're good ones. So I'm gonna be stretching it out, but I'm gonna have the camera up close, and then as always, 1-2 shots. Now here is where the trouble would start to arise. So this one was a through and through. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to pull that all the way through. A lot of times it could break the arrow, pull through. So if it's a through and through like that, that's certainly doable. The problem is if the broadhead's not all the way through, you may cause additional arterial damage or hit blood vessels or anything as you push through. But I feel that one, I'll be able to pull out. This one here did not through and through. It's actually a shorter arrow. This is like 28. I've broken it a few times, so it didn't have as much power. But I'm curious here. Let me try and pull this one through first and see how that works. All right, so for the pull through, I'm gonna just push and then, yep, all the way through. No problem at all. So if you had an arrow like that, it's gonna be uncomfortable, but yes, you could get that through. This one, you wouldn't wanna push through because there could be organs or things that aren't all the way through the actual person. So for here, there's a couple different ways they could do that. And if you want more in-depth analysis, check out Kevin Hick's Early Surgery, where he talks about a few things. One of the things which seems to be common in a lot of people who practice this is that they would just open the cut enough to get a feather, and the back of the feather they would put over the barb, and you could pull it out then without causing any additional damage to the body. So for this one here, let's say, you can see where the problem arises is right in here. So once I get that off there, here is when we run into trouble. So right here, if I try to extract that, you can see no matter where I go, if I try to pull that out, I'm going to be causing new damage to the body. And that's a narrow gap right there. So if I try to line it up, see, again, there's no way you're going to get that out without either a bigger incision or getting crafty. And so just to give you a better idea of exactly what we're working with here, that first one actually punched through a bone, and as did this second one here. There is just no way to safely remove this without causing problems to the body. And there are even accounts of people having arrows stuck in them for a long period of time. I think that what I've seen with that method where you're able to go ahead and you can try to use that feather to pull it out, that could work. But again, this thing bends once it hits. It's gonna change its shape. It's gonna be a little askew. It's a really bad situation. So if you're hunting animals or anything, obviously if it's a deer, if it keeps running, that's gonna cause more problems because this thing is sharpened right here. Or an individual, if they move or run, it's gonna cause additional damage to the body or to the target. So an extremely horrifying, menacing piece of equipment here. I'm actually just gonna pull this out. Whoop! Make it easier on myself. And so next thing we're gonna do is take our meat target. You can see where the cutting edge hit right here, and you can also see where it hit right here. That is really, you can see that difference is pretty astounding. I'm gonna set this up here, pop this up on top, and then I'm going to take the riveted flat mail and see if that's going to be enough to dissipate some of those barbed arrows. But fortunately, as you can see, my mail has had better days. This is riveted flat mail, 8mm, but it does have a couple different breaks and punctures in it. So I'm going to start with bodkin points and the target behind it to see how it reacts with that. Then from there, we'll try and see what we can do with barbed arrows. So one thing I think you can certainly tell is what a sizable difference just mail makes, or padded gambeson for that matter. These two I shot a little high. That hit bone, but again, just punched through like nothing. The second two thankfully hit uncompromised points of the mail. This one went in here into the bone. I can feel crunching around in there. And this was the needle tip bodkin, and that's actually stuck. I can feel that wedged in a bone. But like previously, you're gonna be able to pop those out. And if you can treat the infection, they had ways to do that, honey and different things, linen rolled straps to kind of keep the wound open. You could survive that as long as you took care of it. If memory serves, I believe Richard, after the Crusades, was hit in the shoulder by a crossbow, but he died of infection. So obviously, even with the best physicians of the time, there was a lot they didn't know, but they did have ways to treat things. And so these here poking through, it's gonna be enough to go in, but it's very different than what's going on up top. And let's just see if I was going to extract them easy. This one here, oh, relatively easy, and these two as well, even though they're in, you know, pop out of there, because that tip is not going to hold on to it once it's kind of levered in there, once it's made purchase inside of that target, let's say. So far, it's been a very good video. I've only broken what I set out to break, but now, oh boy, I'm not confident about this. I'm going to test and see how this will hold up to here, if that's going to do enough to stop that from breaking any of those links. I imagine with that wider cutting edge, it's going to have a hard time doing anything. I think this will snap. But Patreon, guys, give me arrows. And there you have it, folks. You can see, I think that when they made this, the steel or the iron or whatever they used was not super well done, because that is very malleable. But regardless, even if that was a firmer point, I don't know if that would have made it through. So, I mean, you would feel the impact for sure. It would probably thump and hurt quite a bit, but that's going to keep you alive 100% against stuff like this, which is why oftentimes it would use for horses, unarmored opponents, things of that nature. Because if you try and hit someone with this in mail, especially if it's coming over at like a arc, it's not going to do much. Now, as I am sure a lot of you eagle-eyed people realize that, hey, he shot a red arrow, but the black fetching hit the target. Well, that's because these are my extremely good, time-consuming, very valuable, costly arrows. And these oftentimes are what I use to hit targets that I'm relatively certain they are going to break with. You can see the difference in between the fletching. There's no twine on this one. This is a little shorter because it's broken before, so I'm just reusing it over and over. And another really important piece of history is that the fletchers had to be just as skilled at their vocation as the archers. A good fletcher could make anywhere from 12 to 20 arrows in a day. That's when taking the lathe, so you're gonna basically cut it down to taper it. This one here starts at a 1/2 inch and then it tapers down all the way to a 1/4 inch at the bottom, so that takes time. Then from there on the knock, you're gonna cut in, but then you have to cross section it with horn inside, because with warbows, you need a reinforced knock. That's gonna keep it so it doesn't splinter or break, because the pressure of the arrow actually getting released from the string can cause these to snap and break. And that's happened before, even with reinforced knocks for me. It's a pretty startling thing for sure. And arrows were extremely important and extremely valuable. So you really wanted to make sure if you're picking a target, you have the right arrowhead for it to ensure it's doing the maximum amount of damage, because there's no guarantee you'll get it back. If you sweep the battlefield afterwards, it might break. So if you're throwing the wrong arrow at armor, it's going to cause those arrows to break. You may be able to reuse them, but you want to be sure to maximize your efficiency in the battlefield. So you really want to make sure you pick the right arrowhead for the job. Now, another way to increase quality of an arrow and reduce the chance of it breaking upon impact was to make a footed arrow. I can show that best here. This is a bishop arrow. This is what they sent to me and what RamBro used with the 100-pound compound bow from APA Archery. Quick side note, RamBro is on hiatus right now. I had to send the bow back to them. They were kind enough to let me use it, but they're like, hey, we're gonna demo it for someone, so I had to send it back. So RamBro is currently resting in the wings right now, recovering from Joe Gibbs and Todd publishing that 130-pound bow video a day or two later. I'm still bitter, not really, but still. So a footed arrow just means that in the front, there's a different material that's stronger. So this is a steel footed arrow. So this one has steel in the front. So when it hits an impact, it's less likely to break at that point. They would also do that back in the day. So what they'd do is they'd use a stronger wood in the front, let's say oak in the front and then ash in the back, and that would be a footed arrow. So those arrows tended to hit a little bit harder. They were less brittle upon impact and would really add more power to the shot, but also just give that a longer lifespan. And again, you're gonna be reusing the arrows over and over, hopefully. So you wanna really maximize the potential to reuse those as well. So a footed arrow was a great way to do that. It took more skill to do because you had to put two pieces of wood together, but you certainly could do that, and that was done frequently in history. Now, naturally, this is not my actual workshop. This is just kind of sell the fantasy. But I use vices and other things like that to help make it easier. However, in just that probably 10 minutes or so, I took this, tapered it down a little bit. I'll need to retaper it more. That was just for the scene. Made a pretty respectable mount for it right there. And then a knock. I'll have to cross section it here and put some bone in as well to reinforce it. But you get the idea. So arrow making is not a quick process, and each one is very precious to me. So I tend to try and save the good ones for distance shots, accuracy testing, and every now and then if I get a good piece of armor and I want to test it really well, I'll bring out the good ones. But as with a lot of stuff on this channel, it's super fun to go into the testing to see what happens and all that. But I think one important thing to always keep in mind is the cost of life of the actual engagements and just the misery that people had to go through, and an appreciation for that type of warfare and people in general who fought in those times, because it really was, you're not gonna go out right away. It's going to be arrows and arrows, and if they hit their target, there's a high chance it's gonna be a long, slow death. So I think that whenever you do these kind of tests, or at least when I do, I try to be respectful in the idea that these are fun to do, but they're also very, very horrible things in time and very bad ways to leave this planet. Well, everybody, I did bring out the 160-pound bow and the 121-pound flat bow. I usually bring those out and use those if the current 130-pound bow is not making it through, but that did more than enough to prove the point here. So without going into those really high numbers, even at that, you can see why armor was so important and how well it did work in comparison to just nothing. Because even though it's making it through that mail, it's not going through and through an individual as those would have done. Excising or extracting those arrows was a really cool thing. And like I said, if you want to hear someone talk about it at length who's very knowledgeable, check out Kevin Hick's video. He does a great job. I don't want to just parrot everything he says because he touches on all the major points, but have a look at that. I think this video is going to be shorter, and also the heads up, I'm probably not going to be posting as frequently because it is summer vacation. So I'm going to be traveling with the kiddos, doing all this thing. I don't know if I'll have as much time to come out here and do the footage. I'll keep you guys posted in the posts. But as always, I hope you enjoyed this, because I mean, it's always fun to have a little gore.